Hi folks, and welcome to Dungeons and Dry Brushing. My name's Daniel. I had an entirely different video already ready to go for today. The work was done, the painting was done, the editing was mostly done, but due to a small glitch at the last minute, I don't think it's gonna make it. So instead, I'm over here looking at my hordes of unpainted miniatures, trying to find a painting project for today. And I stumbled across this guy. This is a dragon Wyrmling from the Reaper 5 Kickstarter. And what I noticed about him specifically is the strange texture that he has for his scales. It's a little bit unusual, kind of charming, I sort of like it, but it's definitely odd. What I noticed about it specifically was that it might work pretty well with a paint technique that seems popular online right now. And people are calling this the slap chop method. I don't know why they're calling it that, maybe I'm just old, but when I think of the word slap chop, I think of this.
You'll be in a great mood all day because you're going to be slapping your troubles away with the slap chop.
I don't know what to tell you. This is basically an underbrushing technique where you're going to use dry brushing to create volumes on the model that can then take advantage of the translucent nature of contrast or speed paints, dipping inks, instant colors, or express colors, whatever your preferred company has decided to call this nonsense. And the volumes on the model just help to give an extra contrast to those paints. I've started by priming the miniature black. I used just a rattle can for this, but an airbrush or anything, even a brush-on primer would be fine. The important thing in this case is that it's black. You want that color in your deepest recesses. So we're going to start creating our volumes by overbrushing this with a dark gray. So overbrushing is a lot like dry brushing. You're going to put your paint on, you're going to remove, in this case about 80-85% of it, and then you're just going to strike down on the miniature from above. You want to cover most of the miniature on this step, really only leaving the black in the very deepest shadows. That's why I thought that the texture on this dragon would work particularly well for this. So this is basically where you end up at the end of that process. A miniature that is largely covered in dark gray instead of black. Now you want to make sure to get the base during this step too, as that will help us later on add a bit of contrast to that, just using a speed paint. The next step is going to be pure white. I'm using AK Interactive White, but again, any pure white will do here. So our next step here is applying the white. It's basically the same process, except instead of taking off 85% of this, we want to take off closer to 95, so that you're left with just a little bit of white. That was probably too much, but that's alright. And we're just going to do the upward facing volumes on the miniature. The very highest highlights get hit with this, and nothing else. Now I already have a young red dragon in my collection, but I don't have a Wyrmling in that color, so I've decided to go ahead and go with a red contrast paint. Because of how dark the shadows are on this, thanks to the slap chop or the underbrushing technique, I've decided to go with the brighter of the two contrast reds, which is Blood Angel's Red. Hopefully, that's going to maximize the contrast between our shadows and highlights. Now, I find that the key to applying contrast paints is to move your brush as quickly as possible and to just keep it moving. You don't want it settling for too long in any one area, just keep it going. Now you'll notice that I am using this straight from the pot as well, rather than diluting it. The reason for that is, again, that I'm just trying to maximize the contrast between our shadows and our highlights. So now our contrast paint is dry, and it's pretty easy to see what a difference it makes to do that underbrushing, how much more contrast you get between highlight and shadow because of that. So now we're going to pick out the other details on the model. For this particular model, that means the flesh between his wings, the various horns and claws, his underbelly, and his eyes. The horns and claws I'm going to paint black, and I'm going to be doing that with Vallejo Game Color Black. It's a glossy black paint, which will just help to make the horns and the claws stand out. If you're doing this model, make sure as well to get the horns that are on the very tips of his wings here. You don't want to miss those ones. So now I've base coated the horns and claws in black, and while I had it out, I also did the base of the rim around the model. For the leather on the wings and his underbelly, I'm going to be starting with Averland Sunset. This is sort of an ochre color, sort of a yellow-brown. Once it's done, we'll be pairing this with a brown wash. I'm going to be using a soft tone from Army Painter, but if you are someone who is into Citadel products, then Agrax Earthshade or Seraphim Sepia should work just as well. There we are. The wings and the underbelly are base coated. Now while we wait for that to dry so that we can apply a wash, we're going to take some pure white paint. Again, I'm using the AK Interactive White, and we're just going to dot in the eyes and go lightly over top of his teeth. Later on, the eyes are going to get some Zealot Yellow speed paint, and the teeth will get a little bit of Skeleton Horde contrast. So with the base coat on our wings and underbelly dry, I'm going to come in with some Soft Tone by Army Painter, which is a wash. We're going to use this over all of the areas that we just coated with Averland Sunset. This is not a particularly strong wash, but it's going to give us a little bit of shading. I do want to apply another highlight to the wings and underbelly, but first we have to wait for that wash to dry. So while we do that, let's apply just a little bit of Skeleton Horde contrast paint at the very base of his teeth, just to make them look a little bit more feral and aged. I am still waiting for the soft tone to dry, but I'm going to make the most of that time. I'm going to use it to dip a little bit of Zealot Yellow speed paint into the eyes of the dragon. Now with them already base coated in white, this should give us a nice contrast to the red scales. Just a little bit of color. I'm also going to use this time to put a coat of Sand Golem speed paint onto the base. With our soft tone dry, I have mixed together a combination of Averland Sunset and Vallejo's Pale Sand. This is going to be just to highlight the wings. Now you just want to go over the topmost raised surfaces on the folds of the wings here, just to give us an extra layer of highlights. Now I'm also going to go and do a bit of edge highlighting on his underbelly, but that step honestly might be a little bit overkill. No one's going to be turning the model over and looking at its belly, so it's really pretty unnecessary. And we're pretty much done here. All that's left is to add a pupil to the eye. Now this can be tricky, of course. You want to make sure that your paint is flowing well and thinned, and then you just want to add, for a dragon at least, sort of a tiny line right at the front of the eye, like that. So guys, that pretty much does it for our test of this technique. It does more or less what you would think. It gets you more contrast out of using contrast paints. Now what it's not doing is adding more interesting shadow colors, more interesting highlight colors, anything like that. You'll have to go to more advanced techniques for something like that, but if you're looking for basic tabletop ready models, this is pretty good. I still don't know why they call it the slap chop technique.
Oh, you're gonna love my nuts. Why?
But I guess I'll have to live with that. Anyway, if you want to see more videos like this, or if there's anything else that you want to see me tackle specifically, let me know in the comments. Hit all those buttons, like, subscribe, that sort of thing. And thank you. I'll see you on the next one.